The snow had fallen heavier than usual that morning. It was the kind of cold that wrapped around your bones, biting through even the thickest coat. And yet there she was, my daughter, lying helpless in a snowbank, her tiny hands stiff, her lips blue, her wheelchair tilted sideways like it had been shoved or slipped. The street was silent. Not a soul in sight, except her, Karen, standing behind her perfectly frosted window, cradling a glass of red wine in her hand like she was watching a holiday movie instead of a tragedy unfolding on her doorstep. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. She just stared. And when she finally noticed me running toward my daughter, slipping on the ice, screaming her name, I swear to God, she smiled. Let me take you back to how it all began. We had just moved into Wisteria Creek, a pristine, snow-glazed neighborhood that looked like it had been plucked straight from a Hallmark postcard. Rows of identical houses with white fences, tidy mailboxes, and freshly salted driveways. I thought it was perfect, safe, peaceful, a new beginning for me and my little girl. Lily was born with spina bifida, which meant life had never been easy. But she was tougher than most grown men I knew, smart, stubborn, and always humming the Frozen soundtrack like it was her personal anthem. I figured this quiet suburb, with its slow-moving traffic and community sidewalks, would finally give us some peace. I didn't know then that peace came with a price. At first, it was little things. A note taped to our garage about trash bin placement. A printed flyer slipped under the door, reminding us to match community aesthetic standards by repainting our mailbox, which was apparently too dark. I thought it was just some overworked HOA manager with a clipboard and too much free time. I didn't know it was her. Karen lived 2 houses down in the cream-colored house with the plastic deer in the yard and the absolutely perfect hedges. She had that forced smile, the kind that barely stretched across her lips, but showed all her teeth. Every word she said was polished with fake politeness. "Oh, I just adore Lily's little wheelchair," she chirped once, right before calling the HOA to complain that it was left too close to the sidewalk. She was the self-appointed enforcer of the neighborhood's unwritten rules, and we had unknowingly stepped into her jurisdiction. She introduced herself one icy morning, standing in her slippers with her arms crossed. "I know it's hard raising a child with special needs," she said sweetly, like she was handing me a pity coupon, "but here in Wisteria Creek, we all do our part. I hope you'll do yours." I brushed it off at the time. I had no idea that this wasn't advice, it was a warning. And then came the first official letter. A violation notice, sidewalk obstruction, potential hazard. It referred to the ramp I had installed for Lily barely weeks ago, after slipping on our icy driveway. It was professionally done, approved, and within code. But somehow, Karen had convinced the HOA board that it disrupted the uniformity of the neighborhood. I called to explain, even offered to submit medical documents. No response. I emailed photos, filed appeals. Silence. Meanwhile, Karen waved at us every morning like nothing had happened. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. It was about power, control. And Lily, my daughter, had become collateral in a game we didn't even know we were playing. And that was only the beginning. When we first moved into Wisteria Creek, I wasn't just looking for a new house. I was looking for a new life. A safer one. A quieter one. After my wife passed away, it was just me and Lily, and every decision I made, every brick I chose to lay in our future, was about giving her a chance at a childhood untouched by pity or fear. She was born with spina bifida and had spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds. But none of that dimmed her light. She rolled through life with that little pink wheelchair like it was a rocket ship, fearless and full of fire. Her laugh could shatter the silence of 1,000 sorrowful rooms, and her resilience made me feel like I could survive anything. I thought Wisteria Creek would appreciate her spirit. I was wrong. At first, things were almost too perfect. The lawns were trimmed like golf courses. Everyone waved while walking their golden doodles. Lily adored the wide sidewalks. Finally, she didn't have to bump through potholes or gravel. She even made a friend across the street, a quiet boy named Ben who showed her how to build snow forts with cardboard ramps. Our days had a rhythm: early breakfast, school drop offs, work, therapy appointments, bedtime stories. We had rebuilt our life brick by emotional brick. But it didn't take long before those bricks started shaking. The first sign was subtle: a little note taped to our door. Trash bins must be retrieved by 6 p.m. sharp, not 6:07. I smiled at the absurdity of it. I'd been late because Lily's therapy ran long. I crumpled the note and didn't think twice. Then came a letter about our mailbox being nonconforming. It was a slightly deeper brown than the HOA approved shade. I remember holding the swatch they sent with the letter and wondering how any human I could tell the difference. I laughed, thinking it was ridiculous. But behind that ridiculousness was a woman who didn't like difference, not in color, not in structure, and certainly not in people. Karen officially introduced herself a week later. She rang the doorbell on a chilly morning, standing in her oversized fur-lined coat, like a monarch inspecting her territory. Her words were sweet, but her tone was laced with something syrupy and sharp. "Hi there, I'm Karen, the community liaison. Just wanted to say welcome and remind you to keep your decorative flags within regulation size. We don't want to distract from the charm of the neighborhood, do we?" She glanced at the tiny banner Lily had painted for Halloween, just a ghost holding a cupcake, and smiled like it disgusted her. "Adorable," she said, and walked away. From then on, it became routine. Little notes, warnings, concerns forwarded through the HOA portal. Lily's sidewalk ramp was obstructive, her wheelchair improperly stored, even though it was tucked safely in our garage. One afternoon, Karen left a printout of HOA policy on our windshield, highlighted in yellow. Sidewalks must remain clear and walkable at all times. That same day, Lily came home crying. I thought it was a school problem, but when I pressed, she told me Karen had taken a photo of her from behind, sitting in her chair by the community garden, and told her she was blocking access. My 8-year-old daughter was being monitored like she was a criminal. I tried to reason with Karen. I kept my tone calm. I asked her politely to stop. "Oh, I'm just trying to keep things running smoothly," she said, her voice as fake as her smile. "You know how people talk. I'm actually protecting you from getting in more trouble." It wasn't concern, it was control. And every complaint she filed, every letter she mailed, chipped away at our joy. Lily started losing her spark. The girl, who once painted snow on windows with food coloring, began asking if she should stay inside more. One night, I found her tearing up her Halloween banner. "If people don't like it, I don't want it up," she said. My heart broke in ways I didn't know were possible. I realized this wasn't just about annoying rules. It was about my daughter's spirit being slowly crushed under the weight of one woman's cruelty masked as community order. The worst came a few days later. It was during a neighborhood walk. I had gone a few paces ahead while Lily and Ben talked behind me. As I paused to tie my boot, I heard a voice, Karen's, floating through the thin winter air. She hadn't seen me around the corner. She was talking to another neighbor. "That poor girl," she said, with just enough venom to curdle the blood. "Honestly, if the father can't keep her out of everyone's way, maybe they should consider a different place to live, somewhere more suited for their situation." I didn't breathe. I didn't move, but my daughter heard it too. I saw her face change. Her hand trembled on her wheel, and in that moment, something in her, something innocent, was taken. I watched her smile disappear not from her lips, but from her soul, and I knew, with terrifying clarity, that this wasn't over. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was something worse, something far more dangerous, and we had just become her obsession. The first real snowstorm hit Wisteria Creek in early December. Not just a light dusting, but a heavy, relentless blizzard that turned the quiet suburban streets into an icy trap. We were warned days in advance. School closures were announced, roads were salted, and neighbors were advised to keep their driveways clear. For most people, it was an inconvenience. For us, it was a threat. Lily's condition made her particularly vulnerable to the cold. Her circulation wasn't strong, and any drop in body temperature could trigger a medical emergency. I rearranged my work schedule, stocked up on food, and made sure our backup generator was functioning in case the power went out. Everything that could be controlled, I handled. But I couldn't control Karen. 2 days before the storm, I received a fine in the mail from the HOA, a $150 citation for failure to properly clear snow from residential pathway. I stood there staring at the notice, dumbfounded. There hadn't even been any snow yet. The photo included in the citation was of my driveway, completely clear, but someone had shoveled a mound of snow onto the base of Lily's ramp, enough to block her wheels. The timestamp on the image was from early morning, hours before we were even awake. I checked my own outdoor camera footage, but it had gone mysteriously dark at 3:14 a.m., corrupted, like it had been deliberately tampered with. And then I saw it, barely noticeable in the corner of one frame. Karen, bundled in her robe and boots, carrying a snow shovel. She had literally moved snow from her yard and dumped it onto Lily's ramp just to manufacture a violation. I confronted the HOA with the evidence, but they brushed it off. "It's your responsibility to ensure clear access at all times," they replied. When I pushed harder, I was warned that filing false accusations against neighbors was grounds for suspension of HOA privileges. I was stunned. Somehow, I had become the threat, not the victim. Things got worse after that. Much worse. One evening, Lily's wheelchair suddenly locked up while she was moving through the hallway. She had just returned from school, and everything seemed normal until her chair wouldn't respond. I inspected the wheels and brakes, and that's when I noticed it. One of the brake cables had been cleanly severed. Not torn, not worn down, cut. Panic exploded in my chest. We hadn't left the garage open. The house had been locked. I thought about Karen, about the way she watched us from her window with that quiet disdain, and I felt a cold wave of realization. I called the police, filed a report, but with no signs of forced entry and no visible cameras allowed outside, due to HOA uniformity policy, there was no evidence, just suspicion, and a growing sense of helplessness. Soon after, neighbors began acting differently. Cold smiles, curt nods, doors that used to stay open now shut quickly when we passed. Lily's friend Ben stopped coming over. I later learned that Karen had been telling people that I was unstable, that I was using my daughter's disability to get sympathy and avoid HOA compliance. She hinted I might be abusing the system. Some people believed her. Others didn't want to get involved. That's the thing about suburbia. Politeness becomes a shield, and behind every fence, someone's holding a knife. I tried to fight back in the only way I could. I installed new security cameras hidden and disguised just inside the windows. When the HOA found out, they issued another violation notice, claiming that even indoor-facing equipment visible from the street violated the community's visual standards. They demanded I take them down or face legal action. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was as if every rule was being bent, reshaped, and weaponized just for us, just for Karen's twisted vendetta. Lily, meanwhile, was starting to fade. Her joy had become quiet. Her art supplies gathered dust. One night, I found her crying in the bathroom, trying to stand on her own, gripping the counter with trembling arms. "Maybe if I walk," she whispered. "Karen will leave us alone." I broke. I held her close and told her that she was perfect the way she was, that none of this was her fault. But deep inside, I felt a rage boiling. Because this wasn't just harassment. It was psychological warfare. And it was working. Her pediatrician later warned me she's fragile. One exposure to extreme cold could trigger nerve shock, or worse. Her body can't handle sudden temperature drops. I nodded, fists clenched. That winter was only just beginning, and Karen wasn't slowing down. Then came the voicemail. It was 11:03 p.m. I was going through emails when my phone buzzed with a notification. A private number. I hit play. Karen's voice oozed through the speaker, smooth and venomous. "I hope your daughter learns a lesson, and you too. Maybe next time you'll think twice before challenging the people who actually make the rules around here." I stood frozen, staring at the phone. The message was short, but its implications were enormous. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I reported it immediately, but the number was untraceable, likely spoofed. No proof again, just my word. And by now, my word in Wisteria Creek was worth nothing. That night, I sat by the window watching the snow fall. A storm had started, quiet at first, but quickly gathering strength. Flakes turned to flurries. The streets emptied, lights dimmed behind blinds. And across the road, in that cream-colored house with the plastic deer in the yard, a shadow moved behind the curtain. Karen. She didn't hide anymore. She didn't need to. I saw her standing in the window, looking out across the street directly at her house. Her expression blank, her arms folded, just watching, as if she knew the next move, as if she was already setting it into motion. I looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully on the couch beside me, wrapped in her favorite blanket, unaware of the storm outside, or the one looming just beyond our door. And I realized with cold clarity that this wasn't just tension or conflict. This was war, and we were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely alone. The storm that night wasn't just another winter flurry, it was brutal. The kind of snow that hit sideways, pushed by wind sharp enough to slice through denim and bone. I had checked the weather alerts all day, made arrangements with Lily's school to release her early, and left work early enough to make it in time. Or so I thought, but traffic had other plans. An overturned truck on the highway froze the entire route in gridlock. I sat helpless in my car, windshield wipers dragging back and forth like a taunt, the storm growing louder with each passing minute. My phone buzzed constantly, alerts, delays, warnings, but no messages from Lily. She wasn't old enough for a phone, and that helplessness gnawed at my gut. She'd be waiting outside the school, bundled in her purple coat, in the middle of a wideout. I called the school office. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Panic crept in. My mind raced. She needed warmth, movement, shelter. Every minute out, there was a risk. In a frenzy, I called every neighbor I knew. Most didn't pick up. One replied they were out of town. Then, unexpectedly, I got a text from Karen. The screen flashed with her name and a message that read, "Saw Lily outside the school waiting. I'll make sure she gets home safe. Stay warm." My heart thudded with a mix of relief and confusion. Karen? Offering help? I didn't trust her, not even slightly, but the roads were jammed and I had no better option. If she truly had Lily, at least she'd be inside, out of the cold. I replied immediately, "Thank you. Please let her stay inside until I get there." No reply. 45 minutes later, I finally reached the neighborhood. I pulled into my icy driveway like a madman and rushed toward the house, expecting to see lights on, maybe Lily reading a book, maybe Karen awkwardly sipping tea while pretending to be the hero. But the house was dark. No sign of Lily. No wheelchair at the door. No wet boots. Nothing. I ran to Karen's house next, banged on the door, my knuckles red and raw. No answer. I rang the bell again. Lights flickered on in the hallway, and her silhouette appeared behind the curtain. She didn't open the door. She just peeked through the blinds, then vanished. Confused and increasingly frantic, I stepped back out into the snow, wind burning my face, and began searching. My calls to Lily's name were swallowed by the blizzard. It felt like hours, my boots sinking into deepening snow, visibility thinning with each gust. Then, just as my legs were beginning to lose sensation, I saw a figure up ahead near the edge of the sidewalk, a jogger struggling through the weather. And cradled in their arms was Lily. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue, her small hands motionless against her chest. Her wheelchair was nowhere in sight. The jogger, a young man I didn't recognize, shouted something over the wind. He had found her near the community walkway, slumped over in the snow beside a bush. Her body temperature was dangerously low. He had wrapped her in his hoodie and was on his way to find help. I grabbed her from his arms and ran like a man possessed. At the hospital, they rushed her into emergency care. Hypothermia, dehydration, mild frostbite on her fingers. The doctor said another 30 minutes and she might have lost consciousness or worse. I sat outside the ER in a daze, my clothes soaked, heart hollow. How could this have happened? She had been waiting for help. Karen had said she would bring her home. Had she lied? Had she abandoned her? Then, as if summoned by my disbelief, Karen showed up at the hospital. She entered the waiting area wearing her perfectly pressed coat and that same familiar, condescending smile. "Oh, dear," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "I just heard. How awful. Is she okay?" I stared at her, unsure if I should scream or collapse. "You said you brought her home," I whispered. Her smile faltered. "Oh, I went by the school, but she wasn't there. I figured you must have picked her up already. I was just trying to help." The lie was smooth, practiced, delivered with the kind of confidence only someone used to manipulating others could manage. Before I could respond, a police officer approached. Karen straightened. They asked us both questions: where had Lily been last seen, who was the last to speak to her, any suspicious activity. Karen gave a flawless performance. I tried to help. "I'm just so worried." Then, as soon as the officer turned away, she looked at me with a flicker of something cruel beneath the surface. A twitch of satisfaction. And just like that, she left. But something didn't sit right. That night, I reviewed the security footage from a neighbor's ring cam, one of the few Karen hadn't managed to control through her web of HOA influence. The timestamp showed Lily outside the school entrance for nearly 15 minutes before disappearing down the sidewalk. No sign of Karen's car, no one approaching her. But the most chilling discovery was what came next. At 3:47 p.m., someone filed a complaint to the HOA portal, abandoned wheelchair obstructing the community walkway. Potential hazard. Please address. The sender? Karen. The timestamp? Precisely 15 minutes after Lily had vanished. It was all clear now. She hadn't helped. She had followed. She had watched. She had known Lily was vulnerable, alone, and cold, and she had let her suffer. On purpose. This wasn't negligence. It was punishment. I sat there in that hospital chair, watching my daughter breathe through oxygen tubes, her skin still flushed with frost, and I knew something inside me had changed. Fear was no longer in the driver's seat. Grief had sharpened into fury, and fury was already drawing plans. This wouldn't happen again. Not to us. Not to anyone. I had stayed quiet, tried to play by the rules, tried to keep the peace. But now I saw the truth. Karen wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous, and people like her thrive on silence, on others giving in. She wanted to teach me a lesson. Now it was my turn to teach hers. "You wanted a lesson, Karen?" I whispered to myself, standing in the glow of my living room late one night, hands trembling over a printed still frame pulled from grainy footage. "I'm done playing nice." The image in front of me said everything: Karen's smug figure, her hand on Lily's empty wheelchair, the timestamp perfectly aligned with her HOA complaint. It wasn't speculation anymore. It was fact. Cold, calculated, and cruel. I didn't rush. This wasn't going to be a scream in the void. This needed to be strategic, permanent, undeniable. I spent the next few days working with quiet precision. First, I contacted a legal aid service specializing in disability rights. Then I looped in a local disability advocate whose niece had experienced something painfully similar, though her tormentor hadn't lived next door. She listened, took notes, and said something that stuck with me. People like Karen hide behind procedure. The only way to expose them is to let them follow the rules right into the trap. So I set one. I began by planting seeds in the neighborhood. Casual conversations with a few remaining neutral neighbors, carefully sharing bits of what had happened to Lily. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth, that my daughter had nearly died in the snow, and the woman who was supposed to help her watched from behind glass. Some of them were skeptical at first, others stunned. But slowly, the tide began to shift. One neighbor admitted they had overheard Karen bragging about how rules need to be enforced, even if it means hurting feelings. Another recalled Karen making a cruel joke about Lily's chair being a community tripping hazard. Her mask was starting to crack, and now it was time to rip it off. Using money I had quietly saved up, I installed a new set of cameras, this time legal, discreet, and wired through a friend's nearby property just outside the HOA's reach. Hidden in a birdhouse, angled from a mailbox, camouflaged in a holiday lawn display. Every possible angle covered. Then I called in a favor from the disability advocate. She connected me with a local reporter working on a piece about neighborhood harassment cases. They agreed to observe the trap and document it, but only if everything stayed legal. I assured them it would be. Next, I created the scene. It was a cold but clear afternoon. I positioned Lily's empty wheelchair carefully and safely near the walkway, in view of Karen's front window, but not blocking anything. Lily was inside with her therapist. She was warm, safe, and more importantly, part of the plan. We rehearsed what would happen if anyone approached. We had backup nearby. Everything was monitored. And then we waited. It didn't take long. Karen emerged from her front door like a moth drawn to flame. She saw the chair. She froze. Her lips tightened. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. Then she made a call, no doubt to the HOA. As she hung up, she didn't return inside. Instead, she strutted across the street, her boots crunching on the frosted pavement. She stopped at the chair, looked around, bent over, and shoved it a few inches into the walkway, just enough to appear obstructive. Then she took more photos. That's when the police arrived. 2 squad cars pulled up, silently, engines humming. Karen spun around, her expression folding from victory to confusion to panic in a matter of seconds. One officer approached her, while another came to my side, confirming everything was going according to plan. I handed over a folder, video stills, the voicemail recording, timestamps, statements from neighbors, and a copy of the emergency room report. And then, finally, I handed over the footage from just moments earlier, Karen manipulating the wheelchair. The arrest was quiet, but deeply satisfying. Karen sputtered with disbelief. "This is ridiculous. I was protecting the neighborhood," she cried. "He's using his daughter to create drama." The officers didn't flinch. They'd seen enough. She was placed under arrest for endangering a disabled minor, falsifying reports to a homeowners association, and harassment. As she was escorted to the patrol car, neighbors peeked from behind blinds. Some filmed, some stared, but not one came to her defense. What followed was a whirlwind. Karen's charges made local news. The HOA scrambled to distance themselves, claiming ignorance. But I wasn't done. With the help of my legal team, I filed a civil suit not just against Karen, but also against the HOA board for repeated neglect of duty and willful complicity. One by one, members began to resign. Public pressure mounted. The disability advocacy group launched a campaign called Justice for Lily, and the story went viral in parenting forums and disability rights communities. The courtroom hearing came 2 months later. Lily couldn't physically attend, but the judge allowed her to testify via video. I'll never forget that moment. My daughter, small on a screen, her voice clear and brave. She told the court what it felt like to be left in the snow, how scared she was, how she cried for help and no one came. She didn't accuse Karen directly. She didn't need to. The truth was written in every word, every tear that slid silently down her cheek. The courtroom was silent when she finished. The judge delivered the verdict swiftly. Karen was sentenced to community service, mandatory counseling, and a year-long restraining order from us. But more than that, she lost her power, her reputation, her ability to hide behind policy. Her house was listed for sale anonymously within 2 weeks of the hearing. A for sale sign appeared like a scarlet letter on her perfectly trimmed lawn. The plastic deer vanished overnight. She was gone before spring. And us. Lily's laughter returned slowly, like thawing ice. She painted again. Her new favorite subject? Snowstorms. But this time, the girl in the wheelchair was always smiling, always safe. As for me, I finally felt peace. Not because we had won, but because we had fought. Because we didn't let fear silence us. And because now, every parent in our neighborhood would think twice before accepting cruelty disguised as policy. This wasn't just justice for Lily. It was justice for every family who had ever been silenced. Every child treated like an inconvenience. Every voice that had been drowned out by the cold hum of fake smiles and weaponized rules. And it was only the beginning. The snow still falls on Wisteria Creek, but somehow it doesn't feel as heavy anymore. It's softer now, quieter, the kind of snow that invites children to play instead of punishing them for existing. Lily's cheeks are rosier these days, not from cold, but from laughter. She wheels herself down the newly rebuilt sidewalk with a confidence I thought I'd lost forever. Her smile is back, not forced or fragile, but full and free. It's taken time, weeks of recovery, hours of therapy, countless nights of reading her favorite stories just to keep the nightmares at bay. But we made it, together. The house that once felt like a trap now feels like a victory. Every corner tells a story, not of pain, but of survival. The ramp she uses was once a source of violation notices. Now, it's covered in colorful chalk drawings. The windows Karen used to peer through in judgment are now where we sit and wave at the neighbors who chose kindness over silence. The same community that once watched from behind curtains has slowly come alive, with empathy, with awareness, and with just enough courage to speak up when it matters. I think often about what would have happened if I had stayed quiet. If I had just kept my head down, paid the fines, and let Karen win. But silence, I've learned, is just another form of surrender. It gives power to the wrong hands. And my daughter, my fierce, resilient, beautiful Lily, deserved so much more than that. She deserved a father who fought even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. We've moved on, yes, but we haven't forgotten. Some scars fade. Others stay to remind you of what you survived. And sometimes those scars help others survive too. They say good fences make good neighbors. Maybe. But I've learned something far more important. Some neighbors build fences. Others teach us how to fight. And if you're lucky, if you're brave, you learn how to become both. This was our story, but it's not the only one. Every day, families across the country face harassment, neglect, and emotional abuse hidden behind the curtain of rules and regulations. And sometimes, it's not a blizzard or a broken ramp that threatens a child's safety. It's silence. If you believe that no child should ever be left out in the cold, if you believe that compassion must always come before control, then don't let the story end here. Let it echo. Let it reach the people who need to hear it. Share this video with your friends, your neighbors, your family, because raising awareness is the first step to making change. If you've experienced something like this, speak up in the comments. Your voice matters. If you felt the pain, the rage, or even the small victories along the way, hit the like button. It tells us we're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, stories where justice fights back against cruelty, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we're just getting started. You're watching HOA Karen, where silence ends and justice begins. And if you thought the story was wild, just wait until you hear about the HOA president who demolished his neighbor's garage with their car still inside it, claiming it violated the setback policy by 4 inches. That's coming up next, and you won't want to miss it. But for now, thank you for listening, for caring, and for standing with families like mine. Because together we don't just survive the cold, we make sure it never claims another child again.